This one comes with no name. Mr. Clavin, I heard you on Tyler Smith's podcast, and I loved listening to you two talk about the father quality of God. I mentioned this before. This is on Tyler's podcast, More Than One Lesson. We were talking about Fences and other movies about fathers and what to do, how you can connect to God as a father if your own father was a bad guy. So here's the question. I was wondering, as a young millennial growing up in a household with a single mother and in a time with this corrosive feminism, how does a male find his masculinity? I have lacked father figures most of my life, and it seems like I have two settings: a full-on Tony Soprano, aggressive and mean, or a complete beta male that gets walked on. Is there a middle ground of masculinity with a sincere, heroic quality to it? What are some good books on masculinity? Is there a middle ground of masculinity with a sincere, heroic quality to it? Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, that is why fathers are so important, because men learn from watching. You know, one of the things about being a woman, one of the few things about being a woman that is actually easier is you kind of know what a woman is because she has babies. You know, that creates a sort of immediate thing, and you have babies and you take care of babies. And I know the feminists get all angry saying that that's what womanhood is, that kind of nurturing, loving, emotionally connected stuff. Tough. They're wrong. The feminists are wrong. You know, they can be as angry as they like. That is what femininity is. But what is masculinity, and what is it in each situation? Is it the ability to punch somebody in the face? Is it the ability to be a tough guy? You know, you have to learn by watching. And I believe, and I said this, I believe I said this, I went on a rant on Tyler's show, More Than One Lesson. I truly believe that a lot of the stuff we're seeing on college campuses has to do with divorce. You know, people get divorced. When you get divorced, and look, there are some legitimate reasons for divorce, abuse and addiction among them. I understand that. But when you get divorced, you blow up a child's planet. Okay, you are blowing up that child's planet. When you then say to the child, "You're fine. You're going to be fine. Oh, the kids are fine. The kids are all right. He's doing fine. Little Tommy's doing fine. He's gotten over it. He's gotten over it." When you say that, you strip them of their ability to get through the trauma of their planet blowing up. You, mom and dad, are the planet. When you get a divorce, you blow up the planet. They're not fine. They're not fine. They are traumatized, okay? Then these kids who have never really dealt with the trauma because they feel bad about it, because they feel guilty about blaming mom and dad, or blaming mom or blaming dad for this divorce and this terrible, terrible suffering and pain they went through. They get to college, and the professor says to them, "Oh, you know what your problem is? Your problem is you're oppressed. Your problem is that nobody likes black people. The problem is that nobody likes gay people. The problem is that you live in a country that's unfair, and capitalism that's unfair." They have a place to take that anger and put it and attach it to something. And I just believe that divorce accounts for so much of this. And so in answer to your question, and I had this, I did not go through a divorce, thank God. It was one of the best things my parents gave me was their marriage, which was a very good marriage. But I didn't have a role model in my father. He and I were at daggers drawn a lot of the time, and I didn't have a role model in my father. And I turned to fiction, and I turned to the heroes of fiction, and I would go through and kind of think to myself, almost unconsciously, but also sometimes consciously, who are the heroes who represent the kind of man I want to be? And I talk about this in my memoir, The Great Good Thing. I talk about settling on Philip Marlowe, because he was a man who kind of stood up for ideas of chivalry, even while knowing that he was living in a corrupt world. And what I would say about this is, when you say, are there any good books on masculinity? I don't know any books called How to Be a Man. You know, I don't know any. I wouldn't know if they existed. I really do think that turning to other role models, finding other mentors, other role models, other people who can help you, is the way to go. And I continued to do that into my 20s, when I found a great psychiatrist who saved my life, and he sort of became my mentor, really the only mentor I ever had. And I think that you really have to find people, even if they're fictional, that you can admire and base yourself on. Because I understand, you know, when you have a father that you can't admire, when you have a father who is against you, who is mean or who's absent, you have to find other role models, and you have to do it in any way that you can do it. And fiction is one of the ways. I mean, there are great heroes. I always talk about the book Shane, a great example where a boy has to choose between the kind of action man father and the at-home domestic father. Both of them good images of manhood. And I think that, you know, that you have to do something, because of course, being a man gives you a lot of, you have usually more physical strength than the women in your lives. You have sometimes more a more domineering personality than the women in your lives. Eventually, if you have children and become a father, you have to show them what a man is. You have to show your son so he can be a man. You have to show your daughter so she can find a man, so she can understand what kind of man she's looking for. You have to show your wife so she can have a good life. Those are things that you have to do as a man, and you have to understand what that is. But of course, it's not Tony Soprano, and it's not being a pushover. Of course it's not. There is a method of having strength and carrying strength with nobility and courage and integrity. And integrity, I think, is possibly, people, feminists especially, get really angry at me, but integrity, which is admirable in anybody, is essential to manhood in a way it may not be to womanhood. To say, act, and be who you seem to be, I think, is essential to being a man. Anyway, I think it is a task. It can be a lifelong task, but it's something you have to take on.